Yo, what is good YouTube, and welcome back to another video. And in today's video we are going to be going over every single charm in Dig as of this current update. I'm going to be going over some of the builds that I use personally and some other builds here and there. But I'm going to be talking about every single charm and basically their rarities, what they do, the best way you can max them out, and where to get a decent amount of them. But before we get into that video, I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers before the end of 2025, and only you guys can make that possible. It's been a dream since I was a little kid to go ahead and hit 10,000 subscribers, and we are very, very, very close. At 10,000 subscribers, we're going to be doing many things like face reveals, giveaways, and so much more. Also, go ahead and drop a comment down below what type of videos you guys want to see, and go ahead and like the video as well, because I was realizing, I was checking my analytics and realized like 9% of you guys aren't even subscribed. What are you doing? It's free. Hit that subscribe button. But let's get straight on into this video. In today's video, we are here to talk about charms. Charms are a very, very vital part of this game. They help in every single aspect of the game. They also are what make worse shovels even better. Okay guys, so we're going to go from the most common ones to some of the harder ones and the more rare ones. So the first ones we have is something that doesn't really help you with gameplay, but it's just kind of a cool one. Is we have the construction headphones, which is a price of 1,000, and it can be attained from inside the cinder cavern. And this has an ability where it just means all sounds are drastically muffled. That doesn't do anything for you. It's just cool. Okay, so no one cares about that one. Let's move on to the next one. The next one that we have is we have the lantern. Now, that can be found in the traveling merchant for a price of 600, and it just gives you +1 light source. I don't know what else you expected from it. It's a lantern. And the next thing that we have is an LED head lamp that is also found in cinder cavern for a price of 300, and you guessed it, it gives you +1 light source. It's a headlamp. What else would it give? Then we are now moving on over to the training glove, which everybody gets for going in and completing the tutorial, and it has a pip amount of 2, guys. What a pip amount means is how many they can actually have. So as you guys can see here, that this has 2 right here. This means that it has 1 pip and it has 2 pips. So every single time I say it has 2 pips, or it has 3 pips, or it has 1 pip, that is exactly what I am talking about. So the training glove has a pip amount of 2, and it can give you endurance with a max of 6%, and it can give you luck with a max of 5%. And when I say when there's a max, it's because if you get an F, it will be a super low one, whereas if you go to head and get an S, it will be 6%, whereas at F it is 3%. So the first one we got is we got the training glove. We're now going to then start moving on to the green rarity items. Okay, so the next item we have is we have the blue coil, which can be brought in Foxtown for 250, and it gives the abilities of jump power of 12%, and it also gives another one of jump power of 5.7. Okay, so guys, there is percentage and then there is just whole numbers. Okay, so the ones that we have here is we have a jump power of a 12%, but then there is also a second pip which has a jump power of a 5.7 normal. So basically it gives the jumping player of the gravity core that you can find in loads of other Roblox games around the place. The ones I'll show you guys locations for and go into a little bit in depth more are the ones that actually kind of matter, and the ones that are actually very, very good. Then now we have the dire claws, which are limited time, so I would highly suggest that you guys can go ahead and get these. These are a limited time and can be dug up from just digging around in general, and they are unchiselable, so you cannot chisel these. So once you get them, that is the stat you are stuck with. This is very, very good for a beginner because it is very, very helpful, and also it's very easy to get. It doesn't cost anything. It's literally just digging during blood moons. Blood moons are every single hour. So this obviously goes 0. This has a 2 pips amount, and it has a strength of 16% plus and endurance of a 12% plus at its max capacity, and it has an ability of attacking a boss as a 15% chance to scratch them, dealing 20 to 40 damage. So this can be a very, very good one to be doing bosses with when you can't afford any other charms. The next thing we have is we have the lucky ball, which can also be found inside this building here, same as some of the other ones. All right, and you can go ahead and buy this for 370, and it has 3 pips. This is your first luck charm you can get in the game, with a total of 9% in total if you get all 3 pips at ASS. The next we have is we have the pearl necklace. This is the first one I would highly suggest everybody does buy. It costs you 800, and you can go ahead and buy that from Cinder Shores. So when you can go where you find the merchant over in Cinder Shores, you can also go ahead and buy this pearl necklace. It has a maximum of 4 pips, and it can get an endurance of 5%, a luck of 5%, another endurance of 5%, and another luck of 5%. So I'd highly suggest that you guys do go ahead and actually buy that, because it is a very, very, very good one for starting out the game. The next one we have is the Pebble Pal. This can be found in the Traveling Merchant, and he kind of doesn't really do much, except for he kind of just talks to you. He kind of just talks in your ear and tells you that you've done good things, okay? I'm going to show you a little Easter egg later on when we talk about some other charms. I'll show you a little Easter egg to do with this Pebble Pal. But as you guys can see, he costs 2,500 from the Traveling Merchant with a pip amount of 2 and can have a control of 12% when you have both of them at SS. And it just says that he will cheer you on, which he does. When every single time you dig up an item, he gives you a little bit of words of encouragement. But like I said, I'll show you a little Easter egg later on. The next thing we have is the regen coil over here. This is another one that you would use for bosses. I'm going to do a full video basing on bosses and basically what's the best bosses to kill, what's the best ones to give the most money, how to easily kill them. So stick around for that and make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to get notified when I post another video. But like I said, we've got the regen coil next with an endurance of +2 going all the way up to a 13%. So this is a very, very good one for endurance, and then also, as you guys can see, with a maximum of +2 normally, and it occasionally heals you for about 3. So I'd highly suggest you guys go ahead and do this for bosses. But everything else, it's kind of useless. I'm not going to lie, people only use it for bosses, and you don't need to use it for anything else. Right, moving on, we now have the shoulder bag in Foxtown. This basically just gives you carry loot. So this basically just means that if we go on into the open thing here, this will basically just make this number go up. And I think in total you can get about, I think it's around 30 or like 27 extra carry slots. So I mean, I don't know if you want that, it's kind of useless, but it only costs 350. So if you want to buy that, go ahead. Now we are getting into some of the harder ones to get, okay guys? So the next one we have the Archer Hat. The Archer Hat is gotten by completing the Verdant Veil. So a lot of these charms now are going to be the harder ones by completing the journal. Go ahead and watch my journal video if you guys want to get specific charms. So the next one we're going to be looking at is, like I said, we're going to be looking at the Archer Hat. So the Archer Hat is actually a very decently good one, and is very good for, say, something like the Solstice Shovel. I would suggest that you guys use something like the Archer Hat if obviously you haven't got the better ones I'm going to talk about down the line. So this can has 3 pips and give a max control of 20%, a max haste of 11%, and a max strength of 5%. The next thing we have the Banjo. This is got by doing the Verdant Veil quest. So there is a Verdant Veil quest over there, and this has a maximum of 1 pip and can give you an endurance of 17%, and it gives a chance to strum lucky music. So it basically just means when you dig up things, you have a chance to play music. That's kind of it. There's nothing else to it. Just playing music. The next thing we have the blue shroom cap, which I would highly suggest you guys go ahead and do this one if you guys want to get boss damage. It's a very easy boss damage one to get, and it's also very, very good for making money. As you guys can see here, it has a maximum of 3 pips with a maximum of 14% endurance when you add these two together, and a maximum of 11% boss damage, and it has a 25% chance to give you the Blurple mutation. So if you go on down into the cave and you go over to where you would make your enchants, if you speak to the people over there, they will go ahead and give you a quest that you go ahead and complete, and it will give you the blue shroom cap. The next thing we are going to be moving on to is the controlled glove, which is another one you buy from Foxtown. This has a maximum of 3 pips, and with all the 3 pips, all at SS, which I'm not going to lie is very, very hard to do, it will give you 15% control. So I'm not going to lie, kind of mid. Just go ahead and get the one that I just said. The next one we have is another Verdant Veil quest, which gives you the Farmer's Hat, which has a 3 pips. This gives you strength, endurance, and control. So at the start of the game, I would highly suggest that you guys go ahead and do this, because this does give a lot, and like I said, it's just a simple quest. So this has 3 pips with a maximum of 10% strength, a maximum of 10% endurance, and a maximum of 10% control. The next thing we have the Fortune Bow, which can be brought from Cinder Shores, and this is just another pure luck one, but I would highly suggest that the Pearl Necklace is kind of better than just pure luck. So we have a +7% and a +7% with obviously a maximum pips of 2. The next thing we have the Ghastly Lantern, and I'm not gonna lie, this doesn't really do much. It gives you carry load, and it gives you endurance with a light source. This is gotten from doing the Rooftop Woodlands journal, so it is a very hard one to get for not really much reward. The next thing we have the Haste Coil, which can be found in the Traveling Merchant for 8%. This just makes you walk faster. So if you want to make a build where you can just run around the map even faster, this has a 4 pips, so it has a haste of 6%, haste of 6%, 6%, haste of 6%, and then a walk speed of 10, all at maxed. The next thing we have is we have the hiker's bag, which can be found up at the lighthouse, which is by Cinder Shores, so you kind of just follow where this is going. Like I said, I'm just randomly driving around, but if you go ahead and follow this way up here, we're going to go ahead and see the lighthouse over there. I believe it's over there, and you guys can go ahead and get that for 1,500 with a max pips of 3, which gives you a carry load of 32, and then also gives you some walk speed as well. No, I'm actually wrong. I'm reading the wrong ones. It gives you a carry load of around 50, a little bit over 50, I think. And then we have the Jar of Jam, which is best paired with, obviously, the Jam Shovel. So there is some charms in the game that do pair with shovels specifically. I don't know them all, but I'm going to be going over the ones that I know and the ones that are obviously very, very good. So you can go ahead and pair that with obviously the Jam Shovel. Obviously, the Jam Shovel did get nerfed a decent amount, but they kind of reverted it. But if you go ahead and actually, where is the Jam Shovel? It is right here. So if you go ahead and actually pair this with the Jar of Jam, this does get better. As you guys can see, this shovel has a +2 strength, no, +3 strength, a +2 haste when paired with a Jar of Jam or a Jar of Peanut Butter. But the Jar of Jam itself gives you a haste of 6% in total and a walk speed of 9% in total. Then the next thing we have is we have the Jar of Peanut Butter, which can be found at Tom's Bakery, where that costs you 4,000 with a max pips of 3, with a control of 5%, a control of 5%, and a jump power of 9%. The next thing we have is we have the large log. This can be found from the journal completion for Fernhill Forest, and this gives you a luck of let me try and do math real quick. Luck of 4.5 in total, because that is a full number, not as in a percentage. It gives you a luck of 4.5. The next thing we have is we have a magnet on a stick, which is 5,000 from the traveling merchant, and it says a 50% higher chance to dig up loot. So if you go ahead and pair this with the magnet shovel, you guys should be getting loot every single time. Then the next thing we're going to be moving on to is the ninja headband. This is needed for the build for the best boss damage, but like I said, I'm going to do a full video on that. If we go ahead and get the ninja headband, which can be found in a loner jungle for 25,000, it gives you a boss damage of 8% in total, and a parrying grants a stack of focus, which boosts boss damage. Whatever that means, I don't really know, but if you pair it with the Beast Slayer over here, it gives it a +15 whole number of damage, which is a lot of damage. The next thing we're going to be moving on to is the Rock Pounder, which can be found in Foxtown for a price of 500. It has a maximum pips of 2, with an endurance of +4% going out to a max of 12%, and then a boss damage of +6% with a 25% strength on harder surfaces. The next thing we have is we have the Solstice Bow in Aloha Jungle as well for a whopping 19,000 with a maximum pips of 2. This gives you a +7 or 8 luck in total as a whole number, and when paired with the Solstice Shovel, it actually makes the Solstice Shovel basically have I think 20 luck, because it gives it 15 whole number of luck. So pairing that with the Solstice Shovel is what makes it very, very good. The next things we're going to be moving on to is the Spiky Barrel. This is a very, very good boss one as well. You can get this in the Traveling Merchant. The Traveling Merchant for 30,000 with a pips of 2 to 3, so it has a maximum pips of 3, and it can have a boss damage of 4%, a boss damage of 4%, a boss damage of 4%, and it deals 50% of damage taken back at bosses. The next thing we're going to go on to is the Strong Lantern, which is also found in the Traveling Merchant, and for some reason all of my titles aren't showing up, so I can't see where Traveling Merchants are, but here we go. There you go. To see, there's the Beast Slayer, Strong Lantern, and Pebble Pal. The Strong Lantern is the one we're talking about right now. As I said, it's just another lantern. Okay, it gives you carry load and a light source. That's all it does. What do you expect more from a lantern, like I said? Anyways, now we got the Vat of Dye from a Traveling Merchant. This is 20,000. It has a 45% chance to give red, green, or blue modifications. I haven't used it before. I don't know what they look like. I don't know what they do. Okay, not very helpful, I know. The next thing we have is we have the Boss Apparatus from the Traveling Merchant at a whopping price of 18,000 with a max pips of 3. This is also a very, very, very good boss damage one. This gives a 9%, a 9%, and a 9% all boss damage, and this is currently the one I also use for my boss damage build. The Dynamite Slash, you get it from completing the Cinder Cavern Journal, and it has a small chance to deal 2 times strength on a hit, and it has no pips. Nothing else except for a small chance to deal 2 times at you hit. Okay, that's all it does. The next thing we have is we have the energy apparatus at the traveling merchant for 6,000 with a max pips of 2, giving you 22% strength in total if you get them both at SS. Sorry guys, I am losing my breath. I am trying to do this all in one take because I don't like editing, okay? I'm my only editor. I don't have time, okay? The fruit hat from the journal at a loner jungle, which costs you 0 because it's from a journal, okay? It has got a max pips of 2, giving you a max strength of 5% plus a control of 6%, and it heals your endurance bar over time. It's actually a very, very cool one, especially if you're kind of bad at the game. It's very, very helpful. The next thing we have is we have the golden heart at the traveling merchant for a whopping 50,000 coins, and it has a max pips of 2, giving you an endurance of 2.4 whole number in total. Legendary items drain 40% less health, so it's easier to go ahead and actually get legendary items with this. The next thing we have is we have the heart monitor at the traveling merchant for 90,000, and it can give you a max of 18% endurance, and missing a hit will punish you much less. The next thing we have, this is an amazing one for strength, is we have the ice picks, which can be gotten from completing the Mount Cinder journal. This can give you a whole number of 2, so a whole number of +6 strength, which is absolutely insane. This is the next one used for strength builds. It is the Imp Horns found at Mount Charcoal for 45,000, meaning you do also have to go ahead and get level 50 for this one. It has a max pips of 1, giving you a 12% strength, but it loses endurance faster, but strongs will hit even harder. The next thing we have is we have the lifting bout at the Cinder approach for 9,000 with a maximum of 3 pips, which gives you a endurance of 9%, endurance of a 2 whole number, and endurance of a 2 whole number. So this is very, very good for endurance. The next thing we have is the magic top hat, which I just use just because you go around the game. You can jump really high and you can walk kind of fast. So this is the magic top hat made from the traveling merchant for 15,000. You can go ahead and get this for a 18% jump power, a 17 whole number, and a 17 whole number, and it also increases chances for modifications. That is, I believe, when you are re-chiseling items, it increases chances for to get good ones. I think it increases chances to get the SSs. I don't know how true that is. This is what I've been told by some fans. I haven't fact checked it, so don't take my word for that, okay? The next thing we do have is we have the super blue coil at the traveling merchant for 15,000. This has a max pips of 3. This is also another jump power one with a 17% jump power, a 17 whole number, and another 17 whole number, and it also grants you a double jump. The next thing we have is we have the super regen coil, which can be found at the combat guild for 25,000. Now it has a max pips of 3, giving a 10% endurance, a 10% endurance, and a 3 whole number endurance, and it heals nearby players by +3 every certain amount of time, and heals you by +10. This is also another one everyone uses for bosses, so I'd highly suggest you guys go ahead and buy that one. The next thing we have is we have the Sydney's Katana, which is the lighthouse quest over at the lighthouse that I went ahead and showed you guys earlier. This doesn't cost anything because it is a quest item. It has a max pips of 3, giving you a control of +8, a control of +8, and a control of +8. The next thing we have is we have the tenancy brace. This is another one I would highly suggest everybody goes ahead and buys. This costs you 17,500 from the traveling merchant, and it gives you a +24% endurance if you get them both SS. But this is the very, very good thing about it, is if you basically lose a item, so if your bar goes all the way down and you lose the item, it's going to give you 50% of the bar back at the bottom. So this is very, very good for getting those divines and getting those prismatics, because I know some of you guys are trash. I know some of you guys are trash. Don't worry. I was in the same boat too, alright, until I got a strong build and now I 2-hit, so it's okay. The next thing we have is we have the Vision Goggles, which you can also get down from Foxtown. It gives an endurance of 5% and preview the next digging bar location. So the bars that pop up on your screen when digging, it's going to tell you when the next one is. The next thing we have is we have the War Shield from the Combat Guild. This is also another one a lot of people use for bosses. It costs you 10,000 with a pip of 1 with a 14% endurance at max, and this basically has a parry 50% attack, so there's a half of the time you might just not even take damage from getting hit by a boss, which is very, very, very cool. Now we are going to be moving on into some of the very, very good charms that a lot of people use, and also they are some of the best ones in the game. The first one we have is the Cauldron Hat. So the Cauldron Hat is a very, very good one for multiple reasons. The Cauldron Hat is very, very good mainly for its strength buff chances, and also enchants are 20% more effective. So meaning this is used for basically every single strength build. The next thing we have is the Ectoplasm Sleeve, where you get this from the Rooftop Woodlands quest of digging up 3 ghosts. This is cost 0 because obviously it's from a quest. It has a max pips of 2 with a 17% endurance and a 16% control at max, and has a 20% chance to give items the plasma mutation. This is very, very good for making money, especially if you pair this with, say, the Prismatic Shovel, which gives obviously iridescent, or you pair it with the Starfire Shovel as well, because they can go Starfire, which is celestial, plus obviously plasma. The next thing we're going to be moving on to is the Flower Crown, which is from the Fernhill Forest quest, which is to get every single tree in the game, and yes, that does include the Divine Ice Tree. This gives you a control of 15%, a strength of 13%, an endurance of 12%, and non-modified items become petrified. So every single item you're going to get is going to become petrified. I believe petrified is like 1.2 or 1.3 times value. I could be wrong. Okay, guys, like I said, I'm not a genius at this game, but I know a decent amount of stuff. The next thing we have is the Momentum Bands from the Traveling Merchant for 100,000 at a haste of 12% at max, and gain plus 0.7 control every hit, less effective against bosses. And there we go, guys, the Blood Moon is spawning in, so those Dire Claws I was talking about earlier, this is your perfect time to go ahead and get them. The next thing we have is the Blazing Gauntlet, which is on my hand, but you can't get the Blazing Gauntlet without getting the Magma Boots. I might do a full guide on obviously how to get Starfire Shovel and how to get the Magma Boots and everything, because I see a lot of people struggling and a lot of people not really knowing what's the best way to do it. But if you go ahead and complete that quest, you will get these Magma Boots, which will allow you to go into the volcano. Once you're in the volcano, if you go ahead and complete the Journal of Mount Charcoal, you're able to go ahead and get this Blazing Gauntlet. This gives you a strength of 10%, a strength of 10%, and a plus whole number of 2.5 for control. This also allows you to survive inside Mount Charcoal, just like the boots does. The next thing we have is the Blood Crown. You can go ahead and get this from the Meteor for a whopping 100,000. When it spawns in, it has a 1 in 3 chance to spawn from the Meteor. You guys can go ahead and get this. It has a maximum of 2 pips, and all it does is it just gives you control. Okay, it's kind of mid, I'm not going to lie, but it also says take less damage when missing. So I guess that's kind of good, but at the same time, it's kind of not. The next thing we have is the Cowboy Hat from completing the Journal of Copper Mesa. So if you guys go ahead and complete the Journal of Copper Mesa, this also has a very, very cool ability. The first hit when you dig something up will have basically a max bar. So it basically gives you a free hit. So this is very, very good to also use with Solstice if you are pretty bad at the game. Moving on, we then have that also only just gives walk speed, so it's only good for the ability. Moving on, we then have the Magma Boots, which I spoke about earlier. They're only really good to be used to actually just survive inside the volcano. Everything else, they're not really good to be used for. The next thing we're going to be moving on to is the Pebble Foe, and you can get this from completing the Blood Moon Journal. And as I'm doing right now, you guys have to go ahead and kill the Direwolf, get the Direwolf boss, and then you can go ahead and complete the journal. And also, I do have a video talking about the whole Blood Moon thing, so if you guys are struggling to complete your Blood Moon Journal, go ahead and check that video out as well. Now, moving down, we have the Prismatic Domino Crown. This is the charm you get for fully completing the index of the game. Like I said, if you guys want to know how to do that as well, I also have a video out to tell you guys how to fully complete the index as well. Then the next thing we're moving on to is some of the boss drops. So there is only 2 boss drop charms in the game. There is the Fuzzball Foot from the Fuzzball boss, which you can get in Verdant Vale, which spawns every now and again if you can go ahead and get a weird flower to go ahead and spawn. spawn, and then it is a pretty low chance to go ahead and get from. But this is one of the best luck charms in the game, giving you a plus 4.97 whole number, and then a 8% and a 8%, I'm gonna die, and then an 8% and an 8% if you have them all at SS. So it's literally the best luck charm in the game as of right now. And like I said, let me go ahead and actually equip this one. So this is the build I'm using right now. I'm still testing a lot of things to see the boss damage. And then the last thing we're going to be moving on to is we're going to be moving on to the radioactive horns. You can go ahead and get these from the molten monstrosity for a pretty low chance. And these used to be one of the best things for bosses. They're not really anymore. It has a maximum of 2 pips with a boss damage of 20% and endurance of 10%. The last thing I'm going to go over is just basically just some of the builds that I like to use. So this is the build I use when using Starfire Shovel. Obviously, you guys can switch out the Domino Crown for obviously the Fuzzball Foot or anything else that gives luck. So either the Lucky Bow or the Solstice Bow, I would say. Or you guys can go for a full strength build. That's completely up to you. So this is the one I use for that. I also use the full strength build when using the Solstice Shovel. So I would take this out and I would use, say, the Imp Horns. And then this is the build I use for bosses as it is right now. And then this is the build I use for when I'm in the volcano and kind of just getting around. If you guys want more full in-depth guides on all the charms in the game of actual like specific shovels and stuff like that, then I can go ahead and do that. But this has been a video basically telling you about every single shovel in the game. I'm not gonna lie, I'm losing my voice, but like I said, I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers before the end of 2025, and only you guys can make it possible. So if you guys can go ahead and do that and put a big smile on my face, then I would really appreciate that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out and ciao.